The dust of the trail clung to Emily Lawson's skirts as she stepped down from the stagecoach, her eyes squinting against the harsh Colorado sun. Durango in 1876 wasn't what she had imagined when she'd left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, but it was her new beginning, and she was determined to make the most of it. "Welcome to Durango, madam," the driver said, handing down her trunk. "Town's just up ahead." "Not much to look at, but it's growing fast with the mines and railroad coming through." Emily nodded her thanks, gathering her courage along with her belongings. At 22, she was starting over completely, having left behind the remnants of a life shattered by her parents' deaths and a broken engagement. The teaching position advertised in the Western newspaper had seemed like Providence a chance to be useful, independent, and most importantly, far from the pitying glances of Philadelphia society. "Need help with that trunk, miss?" A gruff voice came from behind her. Emily turned to find a tall man in a dust-covered duster, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. His boots were worn, spurs glinting in the afternoon light, and a gun belt hung low on his hip. "I'd appreciate that, thank you," she replied, straightening her shoulders. He lifted the trunk with ease. "Name's Samuel Donovan. Most folks call me Sam." "Emily Lawson. I'm to be the new schoolteacher." A flicker of something amusement perhaps crossed his weathered face. Figured as much. Not many unaccompanied women come to Durango unless they're schoolmarms or... Well, in a different profession entirely. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks but refused to be cowed. "I assure you, Mr. Donovan, I am thoroughly qualified for my position." "Never doubted it," he replied, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Town's been waiting on a new teacher since Miss Abernathy left to get married last spring. The children have been running wild." They walked in silence toward the cluster of buildings that constituted Durango's Main Street. The town was larger than Emily had expected, with several substantial wooden structures alongside smaller establishments. A sign for Harrison's General Store swung in the breeze, and across the street stood the Silver Dollar Saloon, its batwing doors flapping as men wandered in and out. "The schoolhouse is just beyond the church," Sam explained, nodding toward the far end of the street. "Mrs. Cooper at the boarding house has been expecting you. She'll get you situated." Emily glanced at her guide, taking in his sun-browned skin and the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the western sun. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling in his steadiness. "And what is it you do in Durango, Mr. Donovan?" She asked. "Bit of this, bit of that. I ranch outside town, but I'm also deputy when Sheriff Taylor needs an extra gun." He shifted her trunk to his other hand. "And I serve on the school board, which is why I knew to expect you today." Emily was saved from responding by their arrival at a neat 2-story clapboard house with a small sign reading Cooper's Boarding House. A plump woman with graying hair swept up in a tidy bun opened the door before they reached the porch. "You must be Miss Lawson." "We were beginning to worry the stage had trouble." Her gaze shifted to Sam. "Deputy Donovan, kind of you to escort our new teacher." Sam set down the trunk. "Just being neighborly, Mrs. Cooper." The woman ushered Emily inside, chattering about meal times and house rules. Emily glanced back to thank her escort, but Sam had already turned away, his long strides carrying him back toward the main street. Emily's room at the boarding house was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small desk beneath the window. After washing away the dust of travel, she sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself a moment of doubt. Was she truly prepared for this? Teaching the children of miners, ranchers, and frontiersmen would be vastly different from her experience with the daughters of Philadelphia's elite. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Cooper stood there with a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits. "Thought you might need refreshment before supper," she said kindly, "and to let you know that Reverend Miller would like to meet you tomorrow to show you the schoolhouse." "Thank you," Emily said, accepting the tea gratefully. "I'll be ready first thing." "The Reverend's wife is hosting a welcome gathering for you tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just a chance for you to meet some of the town folk." Mrs. Cooper hesitated. "Including some of the parents of your future pupils." Emily nodded, understanding the implied message. First impressions would matter greatly. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Emily dressed carefully in her best navy skirt and white shirtwaist, pinning her chestnut hair in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Reverend Miller proved to be a kind, soft-spoken man who took evident pride in the schoolhouse. "It's not much compared to Eastern schools," he apologized as he unlocked the door to the simple wooden building. "But the town raised the money for it 3 years ago, and we've added to the library whenever possible." Inside was a single large room with rows of rough-hewn desks facing a larger desk and blackboard. Shelves along one wall held perhaps 3 dozen books, and a pot-bellied stove stood in the corner. "How many students will I have?" Emily asked, running her fingers over the scarred surface of the teacher's desk. 27 at last count, ranging from 6 to 16, the Reverend replied. "Some only come when they can be spared from ranch work or mining, the older boys especially." Emily spent the day organizing the schoolroom and reviewing the available books. By evening, she felt more confident as she dressed for the welcome gathering. The church's small meeting room was already filled with townspeople when she arrived. Reverend Miller introduced her around the room to merchants and their wives, to miners with clean scrubbed faces and awkward manners, to mothers eager to know about her educational philosophies. Emily answered their questions patiently, though she noticed that many of the fathers remained near the punch bowl, eyeing her with skepticism. "Don't mind them," a woman named Martha Williams said, following Emily's gaze. "They're just wondering if a city girl can handle their wild offspring." "I assure you I'm quite capable," Emily replied, more confidently than she felt. "I believe you are," came a familiar voice. Sam Donovan approached, looking considerably more presentable than the day before in a clean shirt and vest, though he still wore the gun belt. "Miss Lawson seems like she can hold her own," Martha smiled knowingly. "Sam, you old bear, have you been frightening our new teacher already?" "On the contrary, Mrs. Williams, I've been perfectly civil." His eyes, Emily noticed, were a deep blue, like the sky just before dusk. The evening continued pleasantly, and Emily began to feel that perhaps Durango might become home after all. As the gathering dispersed, Sam offered to walk her back to the boarding house. "Is Durango so dangerous that I need an escort?" Emily asked, though she accepted his company. "Not particularly, but a gentleman doesn't let a lady walk alone after dark." His tone was matter of fact. "Besides, I wanted to warn you about the Tucker boys." "The Tucker boys?" 12 and 14, sons of the blacksmith. They've run off 2 substitute teachers since Miss Abernathy left. "They'll test you first day, guaranteed." Emily sighed. "There are always challenging students. I'll manage." Sam looked at her thoughtfully. "I believe you will." They reached the boarding house, and Emily turned to thank him. In the moonlight, his features seemed softer, less weathered. "Good night, Mr. Donovan, and thank you for the warning." "Sam," he corrected. "Everyone calls me Sam." "Good night, Sam," she amended, and was rewarded with a brief smile that transformed his face entirely. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and Emily's stomach in knots. She had dressed with particular care in a high-necked gray dress that was both practical and authoritative. By 8 o'clock, children began filing into the schoolhouse, eyeing her with curiosity and, in some cases, open wariness. The Tucker boys were easy to identify. They shared the same shock of red hair and freckled complexions, and they took seats in the back row, whispering and snickering between themselves. Emily chose to ignore them for the moment as she rang the small bell on her desk. "Good morning," she said clearly. "I am Miss Lawson, your new teacher. I look forward to getting to know each of you." She proceeded to take attendance, putting names to faces as each child responded. The morning progressed smoothly until just before noon, when a paper ball sailed through the air, striking Emily's desk. The younger children gasped. The older ones watched carefully for her reaction. Emily looked directly at the Tucker brothers, who wore expressions of exaggerated innocence. "In my classroom," she said calmly, "we respect each other and our learning environment. That includes not throwing objects." She walked to the back of the room and stood before their desks. "I would like both of you to stay after dismissal to discuss this further." The younger boy, Thomas, looked slightly abashed, but his older brother, James, merely smirked. When the other children had gone home for lunch, Emily faced the brothers. "I understand you've had some difficulties with previous teachers," she said, meeting their defiant gazes. "But I want to be clear, I'm here to stay and I expect your best behavior and effort." "My pa says book learning ain't worth much out here," James challenged. "Your father is entitled to his opinion," Emily replied evenly. "But while you're in this classroom, you will follow my rules." "If you cannot, I will speak with your parents. Is that understood?" The boys mumbled their assent, clearly surprised by her firmness. As they left, Emily caught a glimpse of a tall figure by the schoolhouse door. Sam leaned against the doorframe, an amused expression on his face. "Nicely handled," he said as the boys scurried past him. Emily exhaled slowly, her composure slipping now that the children were gone. "I hope it works. First impressions matter." "They do," he agreed, stepping into the schoolhouse. "Which is why I wanted to see how our new schoolmarm fared on her first morning." He placed a small package wrapped in brown paper on her desk. "Thought you might need this for your noon meal, since you didn't have time to go back to Mrs. Cooper's." Emily unwrapped the package to find bread, cheese, and an apple. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That's very kind," he shrugged. "Town needs a good teacher. Figured I'd do my part to keep you from starving to death on day one." They shared the simple meal, with Sam sitting on one of the student desks while Emily perched behind her own. He told her more about the town and its inhabitants, including which parents would be her strongest allies and which would require more diplomacy. "And what about Deputy Donovan?" Emily asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Where do you fit in the town's hierarchy?" Sam seemed to consider this. "I'm not sure I fit anywhere exactly. I keep to myself mostly out at my ranch, help the sheriff when needed, sit on a few committees because someone has to." He stood, dusting crumbs from his hands. "I should let you prepare for your afternoon classes." "Thank you again for lunch," Emily said, rising as well, "and for checking on me." Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. "You're welcome, Miss Lawson." "Emily," she corrected softly. "My friends call me Emily." His smile was slow but genuine. "See you around, Emily." The weeks passed and autumn deepened in the Colorado mountains. Emily settled into a routine, finding her place in the small community. The children responded to her firm but fair approach, even the Tucker boys, who had grudgingly begun to participate in class. She attended church on Sundays, took tea with the mothers of her students, and slowly made the schoolhouse more her own with small touches: curtains at the windows, a vase of wildflowers on her desk, and new books ordered from Denver. She saw Sam occasionally at church, on the streets of Durango, or when he came to repair something at the schoolhouse in his capacity as a school board member. Their interactions were always friendly but brief, leaving Emily with a curious sense of anticipation each time. There was something about the quiet deputy that intrigued her, though she chided herself for such thoughts. She had come west to teach, not to lose her heart to a cowboy, no matter how kind his eyes or gentle his manner beneath that gruff exterior. One crisp October afternoon, Emily was in Harrison's general store selecting fabric for new curtains when she overheard a conversation that caught her attention. "Ain't right for a grown woman to be spending money on such foolishness," a man's voice grumbled. "Playing with dolls at her age." Emily peered around the bolt of calico to see a young woman, perhaps 18 or 19, holding a china-faced doll. The girl's clothes were simple but clean, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Several men minors, by the look of their attire, stood nearby, laughing among themselves. "Look at her, cooing over that thing like it's a real baby," one of them said loudly enough for the girl to hear. "Ain't you a bit old for toys, Susie?" The young woman clutched the doll tighter, her face flushing with embarrassment. "It's not for me," she mumbled, though Emily suspected this wasn't entirely true. There was too much longing in the way the girl cradled the doll. "Sure it ain't," another minor scoffed. "Everyone knows you're simple in the head, girl. Your pa should have sent you back east to one of them homes for the feeble-minded." Emily was about to intervene when the batwing doors of the store swung open, and Sam Donovan entered. He took in the scene with a single sweeping glance, his expression hardening as he moved to stand beside the young woman. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice deceptively calm. Something amusing you, the miners shuffled uncomfortably. Just having some fun, deputy, one of them muttered. At Susan's expense, Sam replied. His hand didn't move toward his gun, but something in his stance made it clear he wouldn't tolerate further harassment. Susan, have you found what you were looking for today? The girl nodded, still clutching the doll. Then why don't you pay Mr. Harrison and I'll walk you home? He turned to the miners. I believe you men have somewhere else to be. They dispersed quickly, muttering among themselves. Sam waited patiently while Susan approached the counter, carefully counting out coins from a small purse. Mr. Harrison, a kindly older man, wrapped the doll in paper with gentle hands. It's a fine doll, Susan, he said. Your mother made the right choice sending you to pick it out yourself. Susan smiled shyly, accepting the package. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Emily watched as Sam offered his arm to the young woman in an old-fashioned, courtly gesture. As they turned to leave, he caught sight of Emily by the fabric display and paused. Miss Lawson, he acknowledged with a nod. Doing some shopping? Yes, she replied, moving toward them. And I couldn't help overhearing. That was very kind of you, Mr. Donovan. Something like embarrassment crossed his face. Just doing my job, keeping the peace. Susan looked between them curiously. Are you the new teacher, madam? My little brother Charlie talks about you all the time. I am, Emily confirmed, smiling at the girl, and you must be Susan Parker. Charlie is one of my best students. Pride lit the girl's face. He's real smart. Pa says he might even go to college someday if we can save up enough. That's a beautiful doll you've chosen, Emily said, nodding toward the package in Susan's arms. The girl's smile faltered slightly. It's for my collection. I know it's silly. Not at all, Emily assured her. I still have the doll my grandmother gave me when I was 8. Some things are precious regardless of our age. Relief flooded Susan's face. That's what I think too, they're like memories you can hold. Sam was watching Emily with an expression she couldn't quite read. We should get you home before your mother worries, Susan, he said gently. Miss Lawson, would you care to join us? The Parker place is on the way to Mrs. Cooper's. The three of them walked through town, Susan gradually relaxing enough to chat about her doll collection and her family's small farm outside Durango. Emily learned that Susan had suffered a fever as a child that had left her with some mental difficulties, though it was clear to Emily that the girl was far from simple, as the miners had cruelly suggested. My ma says I'm just different, not less, Susan explained. And I help plenty around the farm and with my brothers and sisters. Your mother sounds like a wise woman, Emily replied. When they reached the Parker farmhouse, a modest but well-kept structure with a vegetable garden and chicken coop, Susan's mother came out to greet them. Mrs. Parker was a careworn woman with kind eyes that lit up at the sight of her daughter. Susan, we were wondering what kept you in town so long, she said, then noticed Sam and Emily. Deputy Donovan, Miss Lawson, what a pleasant surprise. Just escorting the ladies safely home, Mrs. Parker, Sam said, touching the brim of his hat. Susan eagerly showed her mother the doll, and Mrs. Parker admired it with genuine appreciation. It's lovely, dear, a perfect addition to your shelf. She turned to Sam. Was there trouble in town? Nothing serious, he assured her, though his expression conveyed more than his words. Mrs. Parker seemed to understand. Some folks don't understand Susan's collecting. They think because she's 19, she should have put away such things. She squeezed her daughter's hand. But they don't know how much joy it brings her, or how hard she works to earn the money for each one. People fear what they don't understand, Emily said. It's unfortunately common, after declining Mrs. Parker's invitation to stay for tea, citing other obligations, Sam and Emily continued down the road toward town. They walked in companionable silence for a while before Emily spoke. That was a kind thing you did, standing up for Susan. Sam's jaw tightened. Those men should know better. Susan Parker is worth 10 of any of them. You seem to know her well. I've known the Parkers since I came to Durango 8 years ago. Good people. Susan was just a child then, but even after her illness, she had this brightness about her. He glanced at Emily. Most folks in town look out for her, but there are always those who mistake different for lesser. She's lucky to have defenders like you, Emily said softly. Sam looked uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same, But they didn't. You did. Emily studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the setting sun gilded his features. You're not what I expected when I came to Durango, Mr. Donovan. He raised an eyebrow. And what did you expect from a small-town deputy in the Colorado Territory? Less compassion, perhaps. Less. She searched for the right word. Gentleness. Sam was quiet for several steps. The West isn't just about who's fastest with a gun, despite what those dime novels back east might say. It's about building something that lasts, communities where people look out for each other. His voice had dropped, becoming almost confessional. At least, that's what it should be. They had reached the outskirts of town, where they would soon part ways. Emily to the boarding house, Sam presumably to the sheriff's office or his ranch. Thank you for walking with me, Emily said. I enjoyed meeting Susan. She's taken quite a shine to your Charlie, says he's the only one of her brothers who doesn't tease her about her dolls. Sam hesitated, then added, there's a harvest dance at the town hall next Saturday, traditional thing, nothing fancy. I was wondering if you might like to attend, with me. The invitation caught Emily by surprise, though not unpleasantly. I'd like that very much, she replied, hoping her voice sounded more composed than she felt. Sam's smile transformed his face, erasing years and worry. I'll call for you at 7 then. As Emily watched him walk away, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the cooling autumn air. She had come west to escape the past and build a new life dedicated to teaching. Romance had been the furthest thing from her mind, and yet, there was something about Samuel Donovan that made her wonder if the West might offer her more than she dared to hope for. The week leading up to the harvest dance passed with agonizing slowness. Emily threw herself into her teaching, but her thoughts constantly drifted to Sam. She found herself watching for him on the streets of Durango, disappointed when days passed without a glimpse of the deputy. He's likely busy at his ranch, Mrs. Cooper said knowingly when she caught Emily gazing out the window during breakfast. Samuel Donovan works harder than any 3 men I know between that place of his and his deputy duties. I wasn't looking for anyone in particular, Emily protested, feeling her cheeks warm, Mrs. Cooper merely smiled. Of course not, dear. More coffee. By Saturday, Emily was a bundle of nerves. She laid out her best dress, a deep green wool with black piping that she'd brought from Philadelphia, and fretted over whether it was appropriate for a country dance. Would it seem too formal? Too Eastern. Too much like she was trying to impress. It's just a dance, she told her reflection sternly. You've attended dozens in Philadelphia, but those had been stiff, formal affairs with men she'd known all her life, men of her own class and background. Sam Donovan was something else entirely. A frontiersman, a deputy, a rancher with calloused hands and eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed composure. At precisely 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the boarding house door. Emily descended the stairs to find Sam in the parlor, hat in hand, wearing a clean white shirt, dark vest, and what appeared to be new trousers. His boots were polished and he'd trimmed his beard. He looked so different from his usual weathered appearance that Emily paused mid-step, momentarily startled. Sam seemed equally taken aback by her appearance. Miss Lawson, Emily, he corrected himself. You look very nice. It wasn't the most effusive compliment she'd ever received, but the sincerity in his voice made it more meaningful than any flowery phrases. Thank you, she replied. So do you. Mrs. Cooper bustled in with Emily's shawl. Don't keep the lady out too late, deputy, she said, though her tone was teasing rather than admonishing. Teachers need their rest, even on Saturday nights. Sam offered Emily his arm, and they walked through the crisp evening toward the town hall. The building was already aglow with lantern light, and the sounds of fiddles and a piano spilled out into the night. Inside, the hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves arranged artfully around the room. It's lovely, Emily said, genuinely impressed by the town's efforts. Folks look forward to these gatherings all year, Sam explained. Not much opportunity for socializing otherwise, especially for the outlying ranches and farms. They were immediately greeted by what seemed like half the town. Parents of Emily's students wanted to chat about their children's progress. while others were simply curious about the schoolteacher who'd come all the way from Philadelphia. Sam stayed by her side, occasionally introducing her to people she hadn't yet met, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of her back. When the music started for a Virginia reel, Sam turned to her. "Would you care to dance, Miss Lawson?" "I'd be delighted, Mr. Donovan," she replied formally, though her smile belied the stiffness of her words. Sam proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Emily, who had learned all the proper dances in finishing school, found herself laughing with genuine pleasure as they moved down the line of couples. "You dance well for a deputy," she teased when they paused to catch their breath after the set ended. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Said no child of hers would embarrass her at social gatherings, even out west. She sounds formidable." "She was," he agreed, a shadow passing over his face. "She passed on when I was 16, influenza." "I'm sorry," Emily said, understanding all too well the pain of losing parents. "My own parents died last year, carriage accident." Sam's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of shared understanding that needed no words. They were interrupted by Susan Parker, who approached shyly, wearing a simple blue dress and a ribbon in her hair. "Miss Lawson, Deputy Donovan," she greeted them. "Isn't the dance wonderful? Ma let me come with my older brother, John." She glanced toward a tall young man chatting with friends near the refreshment table. "You look beautiful, Susan," Emily said warmly. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Susan nodded enthusiastically. "Very much, and look." She opened a small drawstring bag to reveal the china doll she'd purchased. "I brought Abigail. She's never been to a dance before." Emily admired the doll. "What a perfect name for her, and how special that her first dance is with you." Some of the younger men nearby had noticed their conversation and began snickering. Emily saw Susan's face fall as she noticed their mockery. Before she could intervene, Sam stepped forward. "Miss Parker," he said formally, "would you and Abigail honor me with the next dance?" Susan's eyes widened. "Really, Deputy Donovan, you want to dance with me?" "I can't think of a lovelier partner," he replied, offering his arm. He glanced at Emily. "If Miss Lawson doesn't mind, that is." "Not at all," Emily assured him, her heart warming at his kindness. Sam led Susan to the dance floor just as the musicians began a simple waltz. The girl clutched her doll in one hand while placing her other hand on Sam's shoulder, her face glowing with happiness as he guided her carefully through the steps. The young men who had been snickering fell silent, abashed by the deputy's public endorsement of Susan. Emily watched from the sidelines, deeply moved by Sam's gesture. She was so absorbed in the scene that she didn't notice Reverend Miller approach until he spoke. "Deputy Donovan is a good man," the Reverend observed. "Not many would do what he just did." "No," Emily agreed softly, "not many would." "He's had his share of hardship," Reverend Miller continued. "Came here after the war looking for peace, I think. Built that ranch of his from nothing. Keeps to himself mostly, but never hesitates when someone needs help." Emily glanced at the Reverend, curious about this background information so freely offered. "You seem to know him well." "I make it my business to know my flock," the older man replied with a smile. "And I've noticed he's been attending Sunday services more regularly since a certain schoolteacher arrived in town." Emily felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure that's just coincidence, Reverend." "Perhaps," he conceded, though his expression suggested otherwise. "But I've learned that there are few true coincidences in this life. God moves in mysterious ways, especially when it comes to matters of the heart." Before Emily could formulate a response, the waltz ended, and Sam returned with a beaming Susan. "Miss Lawson, the deputy is the best dancer in all of Durango," Susan declared. "I don't doubt it for a moment," Emily replied, smiling at Sam's obvious embarrassment. The evening continued with more dancing, conversation, and laughter. Emily found herself introduced to ranchers' wives who promised to send their children to school more regularly, to miners who awkwardly complimented her on book learning, and to town elders who approved of her ladylike demeanor while teaching proper values to their young. Through it all, Sam remained at her side, a steady presence that felt increasingly natural. By the time he escorted her back to the boarding house, the moon was high and most of Durango had gone quiet. "I had a wonderful time," Emily said as they stood on Mrs. Cooper's porch. "Thank you for inviting me." "Thank you for accepting," Sam replied. He seemed to be struggling with something he wanted to say. "Emily, I'm not much good with words, never have been, but I'd like to call on you properly if you're amenable." Her heart skipped. "I'd like that very much." His smile was slow but genuine. "Good, that's good," he cleared his throat. "Would you like to ride out to my ranch next Sunday after church? I could show you around and we could have dinner. Nothing fancy, but I'm a decent cook." "I'd be delighted," Emily replied. "Though I admit I'm not much of a horsewoman. I have a gentle mare that would suit you," he assured her, "and it's only about 5 miles. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, neither quite ready to end the evening. Finally, Sam took her hand and raised it to his lips in a gesture so unexpectedly gallant that Emily felt her breath catch. "Good night, Miss Lawson," he said formally, though his eyes held warmth that belied the formality. "Good night, Deputy Donovan," she replied with equal formality, though she couldn't suppress a smile. She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Only when he was completely out of sight did she enter the boarding house where Mrs. Cooper was pretending not to wait up. "Had a nice evening, dear?" the older woman asked innocently. "Very nice," Emily replied, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. "Very nice indeed." The following week passed in a blur of anticipation. Emily threw herself into her teaching with renewed energy, and even the Tucker boys commented on her unusually cheerful demeanor. She spotted Sam only once, riding through town on official business, but he tipped his hat to her with a smile that stayed with her all day. Sunday arrived clear and crisp, the aspens in the surrounding mountains a blaze of gold against the evergreens. Emily wore her Sunday best to church, conscious of Sam's presence a few pews behind her. After the service, she changed into a more practical riding skirt and jacket before meeting him at the livery stable. Sam was waiting with 2 horses, his own sturdy bay gelding, and a dappled gray mare with a gentle eye. "This is Daisy," he said, patting the mare's neck. "Gentlest horse in the territory. She'll take good care of you." Emily approached the horse somewhat nervously. "Hello, Daisy," she said, offering her hand for the mare to sniff. "I promise to be a considerate rider if you promise not to throw me." Sam laughed, a rich sound that Emily realized she'd rarely heard from him. "You'll do fine. Have you ridden before?" "A little in Philadelphia. We had a carriage horse that I occasionally rode in the park, but it's been some time." With patient hands, Sam helped her mount, adjusting her stirrups and showing her how to hold the reins properly. His touch was careful, respectful, but Emily was acutely aware of his proximity, the clean scent of soap and leather that seemed to cling to him. The ride to Sam's ranch took them through rolling hills and stands of aspen trees. As they rode, Sam pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area where he'd once tracked a mountain lion that had been preying on calves, which hillsides had the best wildflowers in spring, how the valley looked under winter snow. "It's beautiful," Emily said sincerely, taking in the sweeping vistas. "I can see why you chose this place." "Found it by accident," Sam admitted. "Was tracking a stray steer and came over that ridge there." He pointed to a rocky outcropping. "Saw the valley below and something just clicked. Knew this was where I was meant to be." They rounded a bend in the trail, and Sam's ranch came into view. It was modest but well-maintained, a sturdy log cabin with a covered porch, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney and a small vegetable garden was visible to one side. "It's not much," Sam said, suddenly seeming self-conscious. "Nothing like the homes back east, I'm sure." "It's wonderful," Emily replied honestly. "It feels like a home." The pleasure in Sam's eyes at her words made her heart flutter. He helped her dismount, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary at her waist before he stepped back. "Let me show you around," he offered after settling the horses. The tour revealed a man of surprising complexity. The cabin was simply furnished but neat, with handcrafted furniture that Sam admitted sheepishly he'd made himself during the long winter months. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes on everything from animal husbandry to Shakespeare. "You're a reader," Emily observed, running her fingers along the book's spines. "Winter nights are long," he replied, "and I've always believed in educating myself even without formal schooling." The kitchen was equipped with a cast-iron stove where a pot of stew simmered fragrantly. Sam moved around the space with practiced ease, preparing corn bread to accompany the meal while Emily set the table with the mismatched but serviceable dishes he provided. They ate at the rustic table by the window, with a view of the mountains beyond. The stew was delicious venison with vegetables from Sam's garden, and the conversation flowed easily between them. Sam asked about Emily's life in Philadelphia, listening intently as she described her childhood, her education, and eventually the losses that had driven her west. "My parents' deaths left me at loose ends," she explained, absently turning her spoon in her empty bowl. "And then when Thomas, my fiancé, broke our engagement, it seemed like a sign to make a fresh start." Sam's expression darkened. "This Thomas sounds like a fool." Emily smiled sadly. "He was practical. With my parents gone and their estate tied up in legal matters, I was no longer the advantageous match I'd once been. His family had other plans for him. Still a fool," Sam insisted. "A man who'd abandon a woman like you for such reasons isn't worth your regret." His vehemence surprised her. "And what kind of man would be worth my consideration, Deputy Donovan?" Sam met her gaze steadily. "One who sees your worth beyond any financial considerations. One who admires your courage in coming west alone, your dedication to your students, your kindness to someone like Susan Parker." He paused. "One who would stand by you regardless of circumstance." The intensity in his blue eyes made Emily's breath catch. "That sounds like a rare man indeed." "Not so rare," he replied quietly, "just one who recognizes what truly matters." They held each other's gaze for a long moment before Sam cleared his throat and stood to clear the dishes. Emily helped him wash up, their hands occasionally brushing in the dishwater, each touch sending a small thrill through her. Afterward, Sam suggested a walk to show her the rest of his property. The afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light as they strolled past the corrals where cattle grazed, beyond the barn to a small creek that burbled over rocks at the edge of his land. "In spring, this whole area is covered in wildflowers," Sam said as they stood on the creek bank. "Blue columbines, Indian paintbrush, yellow sunflowers like a carpet of color. It must be beautiful," Emily replied, trying to imagine the winter-brown landscape transformed by spring blooms. "It is," Sam agreed. "Almost as beautiful as." He stopped abruptly. "As what?" Emily prompted gently. Sam turned to face her, his expression unguarded for perhaps the first time since she'd met him. "As you," he finished simply. "Emily, I'm not a man of many words, and I'm certainly not as educated or refined as the men you knew back east, but these past weeks, getting to know you. I've never met anyone like you." Emily's heart raced at the naked emotion in his voice. "Sam, you don't have to say anything," he hurried on. "I know it's too soon, and I'm not asking for promises. I just wanted you to know that I care for you, more than I thought possible after such a short acquaintance." Emily took a step closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his beard, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow. "It doesn't feel too soon to me," she said softly. "And I care for you too." The hope that blazed in his eyes was almost painful to witness. "May I kiss you, Emily Lawson?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. Sam's hands came up to gently frame her face, his touch reverent as his lips met hers in a kiss so tender, it brought tears to her eyes. Emily's hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself against the rush of feeling that threatened to overwhelm her. When they finally parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you step down from that stagecoach," he admitted. Emily laughed softly. "Even covered in dust and travel-worn, especially then," he replied. "You looked so determined, so brave. Like a woman who knew exactly what she wanted." "I thought I did," she said, "but now I'm not so sure. I came west to teach, to build a new life. I wasn't looking for." "Neither was I," Sam interrupted gently, "but here we are." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, the setting sun casting long shadows across the valley. As they approached, Emily noticed something she'd missed before a small wooden structure behind the main cabin. "What's that building?" she asked, a flash of something embarrassment perhaps. Crossed Sam's face. "It's nothing really, just a project I've been working on." Emily's curiosity was piqued. "May I see?" Sam hesitated, then nodded. "It's not finished yet," he warned as he led her to the small building. Inside was a single room with large windows that flooded the space with light. A workbench ran along one wall, covered with woodworking tools and what appeared to be half-finished pieces of furniture. But it was the items displayed on shelves along the opposite wall that caught Emily's eye: intricately carved wooden animals, toys, and most surprising of all, several beautifully crafted wooden dolls. "Sam," she breathed, approaching to examine a particularly detailed doll with jointed arms and legs, its face painted with remarkable skill. "Did you make these?" He nodded, seeming almost embarrassed. "It's just a hobby, started during the war, whittling to pass the time. Found I had a knack for it." Emily picked up the doll, marveling at the craftsmanship. "These are extraordinary. What do you do with them?" "Give them away mostly. To children in town at Christmas or to families that can't afford store-bought toys." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emily had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Made that one for Susan Parker's birthday next month." Emily felt her heart swell with affection for this man, this complex, tender-hearted man who created beauty with his hands and defended those who couldn't defend themselves. "Susan will treasure it," she said softly, carefully replacing the doll on the shelf. "You're a remarkable man, Samuel Donovan." He seemed about to protest, but Emily silenced him with another kiss, this one less hesitant than the first. When they parted, Sam looked at her with such naked adoration that it took her breath away. "We should head back to town," he said reluctantly, "before we lose the light entirely." The ride back to Durango was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Emily found herself imagining a future she hadn't dared to consider, one where this land became her home, where Sam's cabin became their shared sanctuary. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. At the edge of town, Sam drew his horse alongside hers. "Emily, I don't want to pressure you, but I'd like to continue calling on you properly." Emily smiled at his formality. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Relief flooded his features. "Good, that's good." As they reached the boarding house, Mrs. Cooper was suspiciously quick to appear on the porch. "Enjoy your ride, dears," she called with poorly concealed interest. Sam helped Emily dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "I'll see you soon," he promised quietly. "Tomorrow," Emily replied, "after school." His smile was answer enough. The following week saw a courtship that became the talk of Durango. Sam called on Emily regularly, escorting her to church socials, joining her for walks after school, and occasionally riding out to his ranch on weekends. Emily found herself falling deeper in love with the quiet deputy who carved dolls in his spare time and stood up for those who needed protection. November brought the first significant snowfall and Thanksgiving preparations. Emily had accepted Mrs. Cooper's invitation to join the boarding house celebration when Sam approached her after church. "I was wondering if you might join me for Thanksgiving instead," he said. "At my ranch. It won't be fancy, but I'd like to show you how grateful I am to have you in my life." Emily smiled, touched by the invitation. "I'd love that, though I should warn you my cooking skills are somewhat limited." "We'll manage together," he assured her. The day before Thanksgiving, a commotion outside the schoolhouse drew Emily's attention. Through the window, she saw a group of men on horseback entering town, led by a hard-faced individual with a prominent scar across his cheek. Something about their manner set alarm bells ringing in her mind. When school dismissed, Emily hurried to the sheriff's office where she found Sam and Sheriff Taylor in serious conversation. "Emily," Sam said, surprise evident in his voice, "is everything all right?" "I saw riders coming into town," she explained. "Something about them seemed concerning." Sheriff Taylor nodded grimly. "Bank robbers, most likely, the Baldwin gang. They've hit 3 banks in neighboring counties. Got word they might be heading this way." He glanced at Sam. I've deputized extra men, but I'm not taking chances with the town's money. We're moving it to the safe in my office tonight. Sam's expression was grim. Emily, I think it would be best if you stayed at Mrs. Cooper's this evening. Don't go out alone. What about Thanksgiving? She asked, suddenly fearful. Our plans should be fine, Sam assured her, though his eyes remained troubled. We'll deal with this tonight one way or another. That night, Emily found sleep impossible. She paced her room, listening for any sound of trouble from town. Around midnight, gunshots echoed in the distance, followed by shouting and the thunder of hooves. She rushed to the window in time to see riders galloping past the boarding house, pursued by others she presumed to be the deputies. Dawn brought news the Baldwin gang had indeed attempted to rob the bank, only to discover the money had been moved. In their frustration, they'd shot up the saloon before fleeing town, with Sam and the other deputies in pursuit. 3 of the gang had been captured, but the leader and 2 others had escaped. It wasn't until mid-morning that Emily spotted Sam riding back into town. His clothes were dust-covered and he looked exhausted, but he was blessedly unharmed. She ran to meet him as he dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. Sam, are you all right? He gathered her into his arms without hesitation, heedless of the townspeople watching. I'm fine, just tired. He pulled back to look at her. Were you worried, terrified? She admitted. When I heard the shots, I'm sorry, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But it's over now. Baldwin and his remaining men are headed for the Utah Territory, according to the men we captured. They won't trouble Durango again. Emily sagged with relief. Then our Thanksgiving plans can proceed? Sam smiled, the weariness in his eyes lightening somewhat. Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it all week. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. Sam arrived at the boarding house mid-morning with Daisy saddled and ready for Emily. The ride to the ranch was peaceful, the landscape transformed by the recent snow into a glistening wonderland. Together, they prepared a modest but hearty feast, a wild turkey Sam had hunted earlier in the week, vegetables from his root cellar, bread Emily had baked the day before, and an apple pie they assembled together, laughing as Sam proved surprisingly skilled at crimping the crust. As they sat at the table, Sam reached for Emily's hand. Before we eat, I'd like to say something. His expression was serious, almost solemn. I've never been a man who had much to be thankful for. I survived the war when many didn't. I found this land. I made a life for myself. But it was a solitary life, and I'd convinced myself that was enough. He squeezed her hand. Then you arrived in Durango, and suddenly everything changed. You've brought light and purpose to my days, Emily Lawson. Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. Sam, please let me finish while I have the courage, he interrupted gently. I know it hasn't been long by society's standards. Your friends in Philadelphia would likely be scandalized, but out here life moves at a different pace. We recognize what matters and hold on to it with both hands. He released her hand then, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small wooden box. Emily's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. Emily Lawson, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood up to those Tucker boys without flinching. You're the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. His voice was steady, but his hand trembled slightly as he held the box. Will you marry me? Tears spilled freely down Emily's cheeks now. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Samuel Donovan, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was my mother's, he explained. I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. It's perfect, Emily said, admiring how the simple band caught the light, and so is this moment. Sam rose from his chair to kneel beside her, drawing her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. When they finally parted, both breathless, Emily laughed through her tears. Mrs. Cooper is going to be insufferably smug, she said. She's been hinting about wedding bells since that first dance. Smart woman, Sam replied, returning to his seat but keeping hold of Emily's hand. When would you like to marry? I know ladies often want time to plan Christmas, Emily said decisively. I don't need a grand wedding, Sam. Just you and perhaps our friends in town. The schoolhouse will be on holiday break, and she hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Unless that's too soon for you. I'd marry you tomorrow if we could find Reverend Miller, Sam assured her, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Christmas it is. News of their engagement spread through Durango like wildfire. Emily was immediately besieged by well-wishers. Her students brought her wildflowers preserved from fall. Their mothers offered advice and assistance with wedding preparations, and even the Tucker boys grudgingly admitted that Deputy Donovan was all right for a lawman. Most touching was Susan Parker's reaction. The girl arrived at school one morning with a small package carefully wrapped in brown paper. "It's for your wedding, Miss Lawson," she explained shyly. "Deputy Donovan has been so kind to me, and so have you." Inside the package was one of Susan's prized dolls, a china-faced beauty in a white dress. "She can be your something borrowed," Susan said. "For good luck, you can give her back after the wedding." Emily hugged the girl, deeply moved by the gesture. "I would be honored to borrow her, Susan." "Thank you." The weeks leading to Christmas passed in a blur of preparations. Emily moved her belongings gradually to Sam's ranch, now their ranch, and was touched to discover he had been expanding the cabin, adding a larger bedroom and a second small room he sheepishly admitted he hoped might someday be a nursery. The day before their wedding, a heavy snowstorm threatened to make travel difficult. Sam rode into town early, determined that nothing would prevent their Christmas Day ceremony. "I'll stay at the sheriff's office tonight," he told Emily when he arrived at the boarding house, stomping snow from his boots. "That way I'll be sure to make it to the church tomorrow, even if the snow continues." Emily pulled him inside, brushing snowflakes from his coat. "You're certain the ranch will be all right? The animals, all taken care of," he assured her. "The Wilson's son is staying there tonight, keeping the fires going and checking on the stock." He drew her into his arms. "Tomorrow at this time you'll be Mrs. Samuel Donovan." "I can hardly wait," Emily admitted, reaching up to kiss him. Christmas morning dawned clear and brilliant, the storm having passed overnight, leaving Durango blanketed in pristine white. Emily dressed carefully in a new gown of deep blue wool, adorned with lace at the collar and cuffs, a joint gift from the mothers of her students. Mrs. Cooper helped her arrange her hair, weaving tiny white flowers into the braids before securing Susan's borrowed doll in place of a traditional bouquet. The church was filled to capacity when Emily arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion, the building decorated festively with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. And there at the altar stood Sam, looking more handsome than she'd ever seen him in a new black suit, his normally unruly hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed. The ceremony itself was a blur in Emily's memory afterward. Reverend Miller's words, the exchange of vows and rings, Sam's steady gaze never leaving hers. What she would always remember clearly was the moment the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed her with such tender passion that the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration afterward in the town hall was joyous and boisterous. There was music and dancing, a feast contributed to by nearly every family in Durango, and many heartfelt toasts to the newlyweds. Susan Parker danced with her doll, proudly telling anyone who would listen that Miss Lawson, now Mrs. Donovan, had carried it during the ceremony. As the celebration continued, Sam drew Emily aside to a quiet corner. "Happy, Mrs. Donovan?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the same contentment she felt in her heart. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace, "though I am looking forward to going home." "Home," Sam repeated, the word clearly pleasing him. "Our home." Later, as they prepared to leave the celebration, Susan approached to reclaim her doll. Emily handed it back with heartfelt thanks. "Will you still be our teacher now that you're married?" the girl asked anxiously. Emily smiled. "Of course I will. Being Mrs. Donovan doesn't change my commitment to my students." Relief washed over Susan's face. "Good, because you're the best teacher we've ever had, and Deputy Donovan is the best deputy." Sam, who had been speaking with Sheriff Taylor nearby, joined them in time to hear this assessment. "High praise indeed, Susan," he said with a smile. "Thank you for lending Emily your doll today. It brought us special luck." Susan beamed, clutching her doll close. Abigail was happy to help. She likes weddings. As they said their goodbyes and prepared to leave, Martha Williams approached with a knowing smile. "The school teacher and the deputy," she said. "Who would have thought it when you first arrived, Emily? Though I must say, Sam's been a different man these past months. Smiling more than I've seen in all the years he's been in Durango. He makes me happy too," Emily replied, glancing affectionately at her husband as he helped the sheriff move tables to make room for more dancing. "You two belong together," Martha declared, "like it was meant to be from the start." That night, as they stood together on the porch of their cabin, watching moonlight transform the snow-covered valley into a sea of diamonds, Emily felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her soul. "No regrets?" Sam asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "About leaving Philadelphia?" Coming west, marrying a rough deputy with calloused hands, Emily turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his face, the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "Not a single one," she assured him. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Sam's kiss was a promise of love, of partnership, of a future built together day by day in this wild, beautiful land they both now called home. 1 year later, on a warm June morning, the valley surrounding the Donovan ranch was indeed carpeted with wildflowers, just as Sam had once described. The cabin had expanded again, a new room added for the school library Emily had insisted on creating for summer studies, and the nursery now furnished with a handcrafted cradle and toys lovingly made by Sam's skilled hands. Emily stood on the porch, watching her husband work with the horses in the corral, their 4-month-old daughter Sarah cradled in her arms. The baby had Sam's blue eyes and Emily's chestnut hair, and both parents were thoroughly besotted with her. The sound of approaching horses drew Emily's attention. Riders were coming up the trail. Susan Parker, now 20, and her younger brother Charlie, one of Emily's star pupils who now attended lessons at the ranch during summer months. Sam waved to the visitors and came to join Emily on the porch. "Looks like Susan's come to show off her new doll," he observed, noting the package the young woman carried carefully before her on the saddle. Emily smiled, remembering the day she'd first seen Sam defend Susan in the general store. "They laughed when she bought a doll," she murmured. "And you said, 'Let her be, it's hers to hold,'" Sam finished, his arm slipping around Emily's waist. "Little did I know that moment would lead me to you. To us," Emily corrected, looking down at their daughter, "to everything that matters." As Susan and Charlie dismounted, calling greetings, Sam pressed a kiss to Emily's temple. "I love you, Emily Donovan, and I love you, Samuel Donovan," she replied, "now and always." Together, they descended the porch steps to welcome their guests, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other not just love, but home, a place to belong, to grow, to build a future filled with purpose and joy in this wild and beautiful Western land they both now claimed as their own.